Hey guys, this is Hemant from Edureka. I welcome you all to this course on Robotic Process Automation using UiPath. So you'll be learning all about RPA and how you can use it or implement it in the UiPath tool. So let's start on with the session, which is module 1, which says Robotic Process Automation Concepts, and see what all it has in store for us. So let's move on to the objectives to see what all you'll be learning today. We'll start this session by first discussing how can you differentiate between automation and RPA, and then move on to discuss the key RPA concepts which are there, and then see how RPA works using examples, and then also understand the different workloads which can be handled in RPA. So what kind of applications you can develop, what kind of applications you can automate in RPA, you'll be learning all about that over here. Then we will see how applications are handled in RPA, which is basically how applications are developed in RPA, the different development methodologies, the exception handling part, everything will be covered in this topic. And then towards the end, we will look at various RPA tools which are available in the market and see how you can choose one or how you can choose the best tool according to your requirement. So guys, this is our agenda for this session. Let's move on and start with the first topic of today's discussion, which is differentiating between RPA from automation. So to understand this, let's take the example of a calculator. So earlier, when calculators were not there, and if you were to do calculations, you used to do it manually. But as and when time progressed and we understood the power of maths, we needed complex calculations, and these calculations had to be precise because these were applied calculations in processes that we did every day. And so with that also increased the want for precision. So these calculations should have been calculated precisely, and also at the same time they should be calculated in the minimum time possible. So this was a problem when calculators were not there, that there was a problem of accuracy and there was a problem of speed as well. To solve this problem, in 1966, Texas Instruments came up with the first pocket calculator, which automated calculations. So your automated calculations, so now you don't have to solve them on paper. All of that can be done by your calculator. All you have to do is feed in the values in the calculator, and the calculator will give you an answer instantly. So this was a task which was automated by inventing a technology called calculator. Moving forward, guys, now the way to use that calculator was that you had to feed in the values and it will be calculated by the calculator. But the problem was that it had to be done manually. Now, as time progressed, as we came up with a solution for easy automated calculations or easy calculations of complex problems, then came the problem of feeding them inside the calculator, right? So we came up with big formulas or big equations which had to be solved, and feeding it inside the calculator took time as well. So we advanced and we said, okay, so this is again more time. We needed even lesser time to get the calculations done. And this is where you have to understand that we could not help because we needed a human to enter the values, right? We cannot automate this task of doing so because what we are thinking is what we have to enter. But then came RPA. So what RPA does is whatever calculations or whatever equation you give it, it will automatically feed it inside the calculator just as a human would have done. So it knows the buttons of the calculator, it knows which button to press when, and can feed in your equation inside the calculator automatically. So basically, if you were to take away the difference between automation and RPA, automation was the invention of a new technology to automate calculations. But when you talk about RPA, guys, so RPA is not a new invention which is there. For every technology, it will be the same invention, but it will not change the underlying technology. For example, if you were to talk about calculator will not change if you automate the task of feeding the values into the calculator, because all you're doing is you're using the calculator the same way you were doing it before, but now instead of humans, your RPA bot is entering the values. So it has not changed the underlying technology. It is a layer which is applied over the existing technology to automate tasks. So this is the basic difference between automation and RPA. Now, these are the basics that you are to take away from this example. Let's take these examples or take these basics in mind and try to understand one more example which will make our base or basics more strong. So let's take use case 2 now. If you were to talk about use case 2, it's a real world scenario wherein we talk about a company which is called Volvo. So Volvo is an automobile company. So they produce automobiles, and in their company, they had a process which had implemented RPA. And this process was for invoice generation or invoice processing. So this had implemented RPA. Let's see what are the problems they faced and how they implemented RPA. This is what we're going to understand using this example. Volvo had this process wherein they used to process the invoices using this way. So there was this administrator who used to get all the invoices by mail, and by the subject lines of these mails, the administrator used to segregate or used to categorize these invoices for different departments. For example, this could be your accounts department, this could be your HR department, this could be your IT department. So for all these departments, your administrator's job was to categorize invoices and send them the invoices. Now, for example, your accounts department invoices comes here. Now, these invoices had to be processed further. And for those, we had workers. Now, what were the job of the workers? The workers used to get the invoices from the mail. So these invoices were basically a digital print of the physical invoices which are there. So they were basically a copy or basically an image of the invoices which were generated, and these were inside the mail. So these images could not be read by a computer because these images are images, right? So images cannot be read by computers. So we needed human force over here. So this was the process. Now, since it involved humans and there were a lot of invoices which had to be processed, it was very time consuming. And since the humans were involved, it was bound to have mistakes. Now, because of these two problems, Volvo as a whole company, it affected their overall performance. Because even if a small process is there in a pipeline and that small process is taking more time and it's making mistakes, it affects the whole pipeline. All right, so it basically had an impact across the organization, and this small thing had to be solved. So let's see how we solve them. So what Volvo did was, so they removed the administrator person from there and automated that system. So it automated the part of categorizing the invoices based on the subject lines of the mail which had the invoices. Because as technology advanced, they got to know, okay, so there's this technology wherein the computers can read the subjects of the mail and then can decide which category it will go into. So this was good. They installed an automation system which used to categorize the invoices. And now the only manual part which was left was for the processing part, wherein they would read the invoices and maybe copy the things or pick up the things which were needed and pasted it inside an Excel file. This could be the processing that they were doing, right? So this was still manual because no computer could read an image. Now, fast forward a few years, you might be thinking that if we talk about today's technology, why is this invoice processing still manual? Why it could not be automated? So the answer to that is that they didn't have RPA back then. So Volvo now came to know about RPA and they implemented RPA in the manual process where this image could be read and changed into text, and the text could be stored inside an Excel file. So this was something that Volvo came up with and they implemented it. Now, a very good question that you guys might be wondering right now is, why didn't they automate this process? Why is this process called RPA and why isn't it called automation? So the difference is, guys, that when you're automating something, you're basically creating a software or you're basically creating a program using which you can do so. But when we talk about RPA, like I said, you don't have to create any new technology. You don't have to create any new program. It's a simpler way to automate in which you won't be coding anything. You will be doing the same exact things that the humans were doing, but you would be teaching it the same things to a bot. So this is what RPA technology is. So if I was to talk about the invoices, say this is the kind of invoice which is coming in. If I wanted the automation to read this particular image, I would have to implement a technology called OCR and implement it inside the code so that the code becomes capable of reading images. And then I'd have to tell the code to actually open Excel file, store the files over there, which is a very long process. All right, so this automation could have taken a lot of time. But if you talk about RPA, with RPA, the thing is, it's very simple. You don't need any coding. You just have to drag and drop. You have to just tell your computer or your bot, click on start, click on Microsoft Excel, go inside the Excel and paste everything what is there in the clipboard. and you could have pasted everything that you needed from your invoice in the clipboard earlier. And the best part is that why we implemented it here is that RPA knew OCR. So there was no need of creating a software program which could actually read it, open the Excel file, store it over there, and then do the stuff, because everything can be done in a very simple manner using RPA. This was fantastic. Now again, the same slide where we will be comparing automation and RPA. So the thing was that when you were using automation, the task of automating became very simple, because when you were using automation, you could only automate the part wherein it was reading the mails from the subject lines. You could not automate the part wherein images came into place. But using RPA, you could read the images as well, because you had the OCR technology with you, which could be implemented very easily. This was the reason that RPA was implemented on the worker side. Moving forward, now you might be wondering, we have been saying that RPA is this and RPA is that, but what exactly is RPA? What is the exact definition for RPA? So RPA is basically an acronym for Robotic Process Automation. What is robotic? Any entity which is able to mimic human actions is known as robotic. Then comes process. So what is a process? Sequence of steps which could result in a meaningful activity. For example, the process of making tea involves you to just pour in boiling water, put some tea leaves inside it, and then put milk. So these three steps led to the making of tea. All right, so this becomes the process of making tea, and hence the word process. And then you have the word called automation, which basically means without human intervention. Anything that you're doing without any human's intervention is known as automation. So if you were to combine these three words, they basically mean mimicking human behavior to do a sequence of steps without human intervention is termed as RPA, and this is the exact definition of RPA. This is how you should perceive RPA. That it does some tasks mimicking the human behavior, meaning you tell the computer how to do it and the computer does it on its own then to do a sequence of steps without the human telling it again, okay, here you are wrong, because it will do the exact same steps that you taught it to do. So this is what RPA is, guys. Moving forward, now let's talk about the benefits of RPA. We understood that RPA is this, but what are the benefits of using RPA? And why not to create a program which could automate it? Why will we use the RPA technology? So we use the RPA technology because of these reasons. So first of all, RPA systems mimic human behavior with no change to the existing infrastructure, which basically means, like, you could relate it with the calculator example, that the existing infrastructure, the existing technology that we are not changing it. We are not even touching it. We can do everything on that calculator as a human was doing using RPA without changing the calculator's technology, which is awesome, which was not before. So if you were to automate this using calculator, if you were to simply automate the process of calculations by feeding in the values in the calculator, you would have to interact with the code basics of your calculator so that you could feed in the values through a computer. But that is not what is required now because we have RPA. Then it does not integrate with the underlying software. So same thing which I just said. So if the calculator software is not something that we'll be interacting with, we'll be only interacting with the UI part of the calculator. We are not bothered with how the software is interacting with the internal components of the calculator. We'll be just interacting with the UI, which is very simple, which is just like what a human would have done. And this is the power of RPA. This is how it is different than automation. Then since you are not involved in any of the complexities of the underlying software, you're not involved with coding, so these solutions can be developed very fast because there is no time that you have to waste in thinking how you will do it. The way you do it, if you want to click somewhere, just tell RPA to click there. It is that simple. And hence, developing these solutions became very fast. Also, the implementation costs are less because now when your RPA can do whatever task your human could do, you don't need that human worker anymore. So the implementation cost is very less because you don't have to maintain a human anymore who only works for 8 hours. So this system that you're designing can work for 24/7 without even getting tired and without making any mistakes. So this is a win-win situation. You're not paying your bot, and also at the same time, your bot is doing more work for you with accuracy. So these are the benefits of RPA, guys. Moving forward, let's see. These are the things that I said. Please don't consider me an expert. Let's talk about a company. Let's talk about a research such as McKinsey. So McKinsey recently gave a statement which said it will have an economic impact of $5 to $7 trillion by the year 2025, which is a statement to go by, guys. This is like epic. If you were to think about it, I feel scared. And you should too, because I think our technology or our jobs might get lost to RPA. The other statement which McKinsey said was it will touch more than 230 million knowledge workers, that is almost 9% of the global workforce. Now, the way you can perceive the statement is like this, that it does not mean that the jobs of 230 million knowledge workers would be lost. It can be perceived as is that maybe the job that you're doing today will be a whole lot different in the coming 10 or 15 years. Because whatever task you're doing today, which is maybe repetitive, can all be done by RPA. So your job profile would ask you to do things which are not something which can be done by RPA. So your job profiles will change. The way you work today will change. And this is how it will touch more than 230 million knowledge workers. So this is what experts have to say. Now let's move on and discuss how RPA actually works. So let's see RPA in action. Let's see how RPA would fit in a job which is happening today. So let's talk about a job called the data entry job. So this is a basic or a normal data entry employee whose daily job is to aggregate data from different sources and put them inside an Excel file. So this is his job. Every day he would go to different sources. He would take out the data and they would aggregate them inside one file so that it becomes easier to see. Now, this job can be done by a bot as well because it is repetitive, right? You can tell a computer to do the same things again and again using RPA. So the bot or the RPA technology will actually replace the data entry employee to do the same tasks, not only in a lesser time, but also with efficiency and accuracy. So this is a particular use case, or this is a particular kind of job which will actually be replaced by RPA in the coming years. Now, let's talk about another example which we can implement in which you can actually see RPA work in the real wide world. So let's talk about a problem first. So we will solve that problem using RPA. Now say you have a requirement wherein you want to see the product name and the product prices for a particular brand. For example, I need all the phones of Apple to be listed along with their price. Now, if you were to think about how you could do this manually, the way to do that would be to go on different e-commerce websites and see their name and prices and get them inside an Excel file. And there are like 65 phones. This will almost take you like an hour to do. Maybe if you take one phone in 1 minute, it will take you an hour. But I think it will take you more than that because you have to go to that e-commerce website and you have to copy the data from there and paste it inside an Excel file, come back to the e-commerce website, maybe go to the next page. The second page will have again a list of 20 to 25 products, again do it. So what we are going to do is we are going to solve this problem. I'm going to show you how this actually happens in RPA, and you will be able to compare the time that it is going to take to list around 60 to 65 phones in say under a minute. And also at the same time, it will save it inside an Excel file and also mail me the same thing. So the way we will be designing this, or the way the task is divided into categories, is like this. So first, it will identify the elements. So if you were to implement it in RPA, first you have to tell RPA, or you have to tell your bot which elements to pick. So it will first identify the elements, and then we will define a structure. How do you structure these elements inside the file that we want? Then we define the structure. Then we create the result file. So whatever structure that we have came up with, we have to store it inside a file. So we specify the output file that we want the results in. Once you're done with all these three things, we run the automation bot to do the things again and again. So this is a task that we are going to automate today using RPA. So first of all, let's expand all these steps and see what is required in creating this kind of project. So first, like I said, you have to identify the elements. So you will go to the e-commerce website, you will search the phone brand, and you will see which elements to choose or which elements to copy for the RPA project, for your RPA implementation. Then you will define a structure, all right? So you chose these many elements. Now how to structure them? it becomes easier to manage. So if you are to take our example, you will see you want a column for name and you want a column for price. So once you have defined the structure, you will move on and say, okay, so this structure has now to be stored inside this particular file. So this is where you will be doing that. And towards the end, you will implement or you will run this whole thing or these steps that you have aggregated through a bot. So this is what we are going to do. Now let me quickly show you the application that I've designed in UiPath, which will do the exact same things that I just told you. So let me go to my UiPath Studio, which is here. So this is the application that I've designed. Today, I'm just going to show you how it actually works. So basically what it will do is, for taking in the input, it will basically read an email from my inbox. So let me send myself an email with a search term that I want to be worked on. So I'll send myself an email which says, say I want all the lists of phones from Apple. So I will type in iPhone and I will send myself this email. So if I refresh it now, you can see I have a mail with the subject line iPhone. Now I will go back to my application and I'll simply run it. So let's see what will happen now. So now I've configured my application to actually go to an e-commerce website called Flipkart. It's reached Flipkart. It is picking up all the phones. It is going on each page to see, okay, I have these many phones here, these many phones here, and these many phones here. Picking up the values, storing it inside a variable, which is basically the structure that we talked about. Inside that variable, I've defined the structure. This is the structure that I want my files to be in. And then that variable, once it's finished taking the data, it's extracting the data, that variable is actually implemented inside an Excel file. That Excel file is actually mailed back to me. So this is very cool. This is the power of RPA. And I think I took around 10 or 15 minutes to design this application. So let me go back to my mail to see. I've got an email back from the RPA bot, which says query. Let me open this email. And the bot has attached me a file. So let's open this file. And as you can see, it has listed down all the iPhones which it could find on that particular website, along with their URL and along with their price. So it has given me all the prices and it extracted around 45 phones, which is impressive. So if I were to extract this information, this would have easily taken me around 1 or 2 hours, depending on the speed, and also storing it inside an Excel file. And yeah, it mailed me as well. So this is completely awesome that this can be done through RPA. So let me come back to our slides to see what we have next. All right, so we have successfully seen how RPA works in real life. Let's move on to discuss. Now you might be wondering, this was one type of application that I could develop. But what are the different type of workloads which can be handled in RPA, which could be automated using RPA? So let's see that. So these are the type of workloads which could be automated in RPA, guys. The first kind of workload is the repetitive kind of workload. So like the data entry employee's job. So his job was to repeatedly do things the exact same manner for every task. These kind of tasks or these kind of automations can be implemented in RPA or can be designed in RPA to be done very easily. Then we have scalable tasks. So whenever we have to scale something, for example, you have to scale your server. For scaling your server, you have to follow a particular steps. These steps can be told to RPA to do this particular way, and it will implement it in its own software and do it for you whenever you require. The other kind of tasks which can be done is wherein you learn by doing it iteratively. For example, as humans, when we do a particular task again and again, we learn it to do it better. We learn it to do it in a smarter way. That same thing can be done by RPA as well. So it can find efficient ways to do a particular task by learning iteratively. So this is also a feature that you have in RPA, and these type of workloads can also be handled in the RPA tool. Moving forward, these three workloads that we just discussed are actually handled by three type of bots. Now you might be wondering, what are bots? So bots are nothing but the agents which are working in the system. For example, right now, what happened was I clicked on run. So some entity went into my email. It actually saw, okay, this is the first unread email that I have. It took the subject line out of my email and then went to flipkart.com, searched it over there, got the results, copied the extracted information, saved it inside the Excel file, went again to my email and mailed me back. So this is all done by an entity. And this is what a bot is. A bot is basically the entity which is running the program for you. So like I said, bots are software programs that mimic the behavior of a human. Whatever you'll be specifying inside the project is what is going to be executed by the bot. Bots automate routine tasks and eliminate inefficiency. So like I said, all the repetitive tasks that you want to do can be done by the bots in the way that you have specified without any inefficiency. It will never get tired. It will work 24/7 for you. So there is no scope for inefficiency. And also, when we talk about bots, there are basically three types of bots which are there in RPA. So let's understand these three types of bots. The type of bots which have been defined actually are actually used for different kind of workloads or different kind of tasks. So for example, the first bot, which is the task bot, is used for applications wherein you are doing automation for front end. So whenever you're executing an application which involves the front end, your job will be done by the task bot. Also, whenever there is repetition or there are rule-based tasks, they will also be done by task bots. And task bots are basically something which will be implemented more than the other two. Let's see what are the other two bots. So the second type of bot is a meta bot. So what is a meta bot? A meta bot is basically which is based on the properties where your implementation is being carried out. Now, when I say properties, what I basically mean is, for example, I went to a website called Flipkart.com. If tomorrow the UI for Flipkart.com changes, my task bot will fail because I've told my task bot to exactly go to this particular element, click it, or go to this particular element and do so. But what if all those elements change? In that case, my task bot will fail. And that is where my meta bot will help me. So my meta bot works differently than a task bot. It is defined on the basis of properties. And mostly if applications are changed with time, it will have no effect on my automation that I'm trying to do. So this is the job for my MetaBot, and then I have my IQ bot. So we discussed there are workloads wherein we learn iteratively, right? So for all those kind of workloads, we have the IQ bot, which continuously learns and enhances the process automation. So it will find smarter ways of doing a particular task, and it also manages fuzzy rules and processes unstructured data. Whenever you're dealing with input which you have no control on, it can also help you to sort those kind of inputs, the IQ bot. Now you might be thinking, where are these bots actually used inside the tool? So inside the tool, guys, there is no specific section which will say what kind of bot you want to implement, but it all depends on the kind of projects that you're creating. But in any kind of project, if you see that this particular task is happening, that is actually being done by your IQ bot or by your meta bot or by your task bot. So what you should take from what we have just discussed is that these three kind of tasks are also possible in RPA. Like I just did for Flipkart, right? I did an automation process for Flipkart. Then one of you might ask me that what if the UI changes? So I have an answer for that by saying, okay, then I can create a project in MetaBot which will actually cover that disadvantage wherein my UI will change, my automation must have to be created again. Now, we have discussed the kind of workloads which are possible or which can be created or which can be automated in RPA. Let's see what are the different ways you can deploy an application in RPA. So when you deploy applications in RPA, guys, there are basically two ways that application can actually run. So these two ways are basically, you can either create a front office robot or you can create a back office robot. Now, what is the basic difference between them is the way they are triggered. So when we talk about front office robot, it is an attended bot which executes its automation on the user's local workstation. So it always needs a human trigger, that is, I ran my project, nobody else ran it, or no other entity which was automated ran my project. So I will always need a human touch to start my project. Or the other way it could be is the way that I can execute this particular task is that I can say at 3 p.m. run this particular project. That is also a way to do it. So if I'm trying to execute my application, if my application has been designed in such a way that it will be executed like this, these kind of applications would be termed as front office robots because you need a human to execute them, right? They're not executing on their own. You still need human to actually work around with them. But when we talk about back office robots, guys, so you don't need the human trigger in this. So these kind of robots can actually work from directions given by a server. For example, I say that whenever an email comes in, trigger my project. So if I were to implement this kind of automation in the current project that I just discussed with you, then in that case, it would be termed as a back office robot, because in that case, you're not doing a human trigger. Your project is running on your own by the instructions from the server telling me that an email has come, please execute this particular project for me. Now, even if you're having a back office robot, that does not mean that it cannot execute through a human trigger or through by scheduling. It can also do that. But a front office robot will never be able to do so. Why are we discussing this is because when you talk about UiPath, guys, the community edition that you guys will be practicing on will only be focused on front office robots. For back office robots, you have to actually buy the license or you have to buy the software, and then you will be able to create those kind of applications. So this is the reason I just explained you what are the different ways to deploy an RPA, and this is also something you should know. Moving forward, let's look at some application examples which can be easily implemented in RPA. So you can automate application releases through RPA. You can also automate networking. You can automate logging and troubleshooting, and also automate monitoring through RPA. And there are, again, a lot of use cases which can be automated using RPA whenever we have those traits that the task is repetitive, or the task is a scalability problem, or it has something to do with doing it more efficiently. Now let's see how applications can be developed in RPA. So there is a particular methodology which you can follow to develop applications in RPA when you are trying to create a complex project, because that helps or that is followed in businesses whenever they're creating applications. So RPA follows a structured stage-wise implementation approach. This is something which you have to keep in mind whenever you're creating applications. You have to try to make it as structured as possible so that you don't miss out on anything, because it gives our RPA solution a structured frame. And the RPA development methodologies has basically 4 distinctive stages. So there are 4 stages that you have to keep in mind whenever you're creating a project in RPA. So these 4 stages are the things which every project goes through, even if you realize it or not. So let's see what are these 4 stages. So these are the 4 stages, guys. You first have to assess, then you have to approve, then you design, and then you implement, that are followed to actually create an application in RPA. So first we have to assess what are the requirements. So say you are creating an RPA application for a customer. So the first thing that you will be asking your customer is, what do you want? So you will be assessing their requirements. You will be taking their requirements down and you'll be saying, okay, so this is what has to be automated. Then comes approve. So in approve, what happens is you come up with a list of requirements. You say, okay, these are the things which can be automated and these are not. Are you sure you want to get these done in your project? So this is taking an approval. So this approval could be from your manager, it could be from the customers that you're dealing with. Then comes design, wherein you'll be designing your project. So once you're sure, okay, so this is the thing that you have to go forward with, you go on to design your project inside RPA. And towards the end, you implement it. So in the implementation stage, it could be either a front office robot or it could be a back office robot. So this is the development methodology that RPA follows. Let's look at each stage one by one. So like I said, the first stage is where you will be taking in requirements from your user. Whenever we are taking or whenever we are including the requirements, these are the 4 things that you have to basically take care of. You have to take care of the schedule. So which task has to be done first and which has to be done later. For example, you say, okay, so this is the thing that the user wants, but this process should be done first in the application and this particular task should be done later, because the second might have a dependency on the first. And also you take into importance what is more important. So whatever is more important, you do it first. So that should be the first thing on your list. And the data type usage, so whatever requirement that your customer is giving you, you also have to take in account how you will be able to implement it inside your RPA project. So you should be seeing, okay, so this is the kind of format that he wants in the output. You should have a clear picture in mind. How will this particular format be given to the customer? So for giving it to the customers, obviously it has to pass through something. It has to pass through a variable. And therefore you have to think about a data type which will be able to handle that kind of output. And also the department it is related to. So what kind of project it is. Is it an accounts department project? Is it an HR department project? So all of these comes under assess. So once you've assessed your requirements, the next stage is to get it approved. So it starts with an approval of the process which is to be automated, right? So you scheduled everything, you took your requirements according to the importance, and then you come up with a plan. Now you have to get it approved. You have to get the plan approved to actually go on and create that project. So before coming to that approval, your assessing stage has to go through thorough investigation and the documentation. So when I say documentation, basically whatever you're trying to create will have a document attached to it, so that whenever somebody is trying to understand your project or is trying to understand how your project works, he has to go and read something, and that something is what documentation is. So you also have to create a documentation, and the stage ends with a business case being presented to the management team. So like I said, you will either present it to your manager saying, okay, so this is what my project is going to do, these are the requirements, and this is what I'm going to create. Is it okay? So this could be either customer facing or it could be like managerial facing if you're in a big company. Now, after the robot is thorough with the process it has to go through that you have designed in your program, it will also go through a series of tests wherein you can say, okay, this process can be done in a more efficient way. So you will program or you will design your project in a more smarter way so that the robot can do some tasks more easily or could be done in a better way. And its stage ends by testing the robot. So you test it whether you're getting the correct output or not, and everything. Once you're getting the correct output and all of the above points are addressed, you move to the next stage, which is the implementation part. So once you have assessed the requirements, you have approved the requirements, you have created your project, now comes the implementation part. Now, when you come to the implementation part, this is basically testing, but on a whole different level. Now you will be actually deploying your robot in a live environment which is created inside your development team, and you will see how the behavior of the robot, how the robot behaves to different kind of inputs. And if there are things which you think are some things which are not going according to what the user wants, you will have to program it again. So this is a whole cycle in the end of which you get a complete ended product. So like I said, so if you were to recap, in the assess stage, you took the requirements from the customer. In the approve stage, you scheduled the requirements, you put them down according to importance, and then you get an approval from your management team or from your customers. Once you have an approval comes the design stage where you actually design your project and you test your project locally. And during the implementation stage, you deploy your project in a live working environment and see how the robot responds to different kind of inputs. And if there are any problems or if there are any outputs which the customer doesn't want, you will handle them. This, you end the development stage and you get a finished product. So this is how a typical RPA application will be developed in a company, or it could be the way you will create your RPA application. Now, I mentioned there might be some errors in the work environment, or there might be some errors when you'll be testing your robot. So how to handle these errors or how to handle these exceptions is what we're going to talk now. So let's see how to handle exceptions encountered in RPA. So let's see what are exceptions. First, exceptions arise when dealing with a software program and should be handled properly. So it could be something like your output is coming correctly, but there are some things which are coming along with the output. So how to handle these exceptions or how to handle these errors? The success of exception handling depends on how well it is implemented during development. All right. So if you have structured your program or if you have done everything correctly during the development phase, your exception handling becomes very easy. You basically will not get any exception when you're trying to test it in your work environment. And also, guys, exception handling is very important because if exceptions are left unhandled, it could impair the RPA functionality, because then in the live environment, if the exception, you didn't see that exception coming, that exception was not something which was taken into account when you were testing a robot, and suddenly when the exception comes, when you're actually working or when you're given your customer the product, it actually, just crashes the software and your customer's work, whatever he was supposed to do with that RPA tool, comes to a halt. So that also is a problem. So you should be very careful when you're actually testing your robot to handle all the exceptions which might arise from your project. It ensures that problems can be automatically resolved or easily identifiable. All right. So you can also design your project in such a way that whenever an error comes, now there could be a lot of errors. You cannot assess everything, but you can also tell your program to actually, if there is an error, get yourself out from that error in a very graceful way. For example, you're using Chrome, right? Now, if you're using Chrome and you're working in the middle, it suddenly drops off, it suddenly closes. You will not know what exactly happened. But instead, what Chrome does is it handles this kind of problem very smartly. What it does is it says your Chrome is not responding and you might have to restart it. So then you don't feel that the Chrome has crashed. You feel, okay, my Chrome is not able to handle the problem that I just gave it. And you think, okay, maybe it's a system problem, which actually it is. But you cannot say that Chrome, there was a problem with the Chrome software, because Chrome got through that error very gracefully. So this was an exception that you ran out of memory. So how will Chrome handle that? So when you have these kind of problems, you have to handle these problems. And the way to handle them is using exception handling. Now, what are the exception types that can arise when you're using RPA? So there are two types of exceptions that you can get. So one type of exception could be a business exception, or it could be a system exception. For example, what I just told you, that your computer ran out of memory, that is a system exception. The other kind of exceptions are business exceptions. So let's see what are business exceptions first. So business exceptions occur when established rules are broken. So if you have said that inside my company, this is the way things happen, and you're like, okay, so this is the way things happen, you will design your bot to work that way. But tomorrow your business process changes, but your tool or your RPA bot was programmed to work in the previous rule. So you will still work that way, and that is when a business exception actually comes in, or this is where a business exception actually occurs. For example, you created a bot for online payment. And say before, when you got your bot created from your RPA developer, you said, okay, transactions more than 20,000 should not be accepted. So that was the maximum CAC, say, that you gave to your bot. So you told your bot, whenever there are transactions, or whenever there is a situation, the transaction is requiring amount which is more than $20,000, decline that transaction. So now inside the company, you come up with the rule, okay, so from now on, we will also be accepting payments which are above $20,000. In that case, when you will try your bot to automate the task, that bot will not be able to do so, because there is no problem with the bot, there is no problem with the system. The problem is with the rules that you defined before and the rules that you have defined now. It becomes a business exception because the framework that you built your bot around has now changed. So your bot has to be reprogrammed so that it can be able to, if you were to talk about this example, take extractions which are more than $20,000. Then comes system errors. So system errors are nothing but technical errors that your system might encounter. So these are not errors that are found in your program, but on the system on which it is being implemented. So one problem cause that every system can have is it runs out of space, or it runs out of memory. So what should your bot do in these kind of situations? So this you can define in exception handling. Right? So these kind of errors you have to actually take care when you're designing your applications. Now, we have discussed exception handling, we have discussed how applications are developed, we discussed what RPA is. The last part, which is very much important in any kind of application that you're creating, is security. So what is security in RPA, or how is security handled in RPA? When we talk about security, guys, so let's talk about how secure is RPA right now. So configuring business automation carries a risk of exploiting security flaws or committing human errors. So there is a risk of exploiting securities if your configuration is not correct. Because when you're automating, basically you're given all your credentials inside a particular variable. So this variable could be exploited by a hacker or by someone who's trying to gain access to your system. So you have to be very careful whenever you are automating a business process which involves credentials. So RPA tools provide the means to limit user action based on rules. So the user actions can be restricted by creating roles. Now, what are roles we are going to discuss in a few moments, but if you cannot control your variables, because variables can be accessed by anyone if they have the access to it. But what if you cut down that access? What if you say that users don't even have the access to access the variable? Only a RPA developer will have the access to the variables. In that case, you actually secure your application from external entities. Now, what are these role-based access that I'm just telling you? So role-based access allows an organization to maintain access privileges in the team. So this person can only access this part of the program. This person can access only this part of the program. So this is what role-based access is. And this basically restricts any unauthorized roles which are trying to access your program. So if particular person is not authorized to basically take part or to basically use a particular module of a program, he will not be able to do so because of role-based access. What is role-based access? Let's discuss that now. So role-based access basically means it is a method of regulating access to a computer or network resources based on the roles of individual users within an entity. For example, I have a company account. So my company account can be given the edit changes, right? So if there's a file, I can edit that file. Other person, his name is maybe Tyler, he can only view that file. Same is the case with Sebastian. So Sebastian maybe can create and delete a file. So you might be wondering what is the difference between this role and this role. So Sebastian can create and delete a file, but I can only edit the already created files. So this is the difference between Jake and Sebastian. Whereas Tyler can do neither of the two. He can only view a file which is already existing in the system. So you're given access to different users, and these users have basically been given roles that you have the view role. Only you can only view a file, you can only create or delete files, or you can only edit the files. This is what role-based access basically means. Now, using role-based access, so how does role-based access actually work? So it involves a built-in privilege system. So basically you have an administrator who says, okay, a developer gets access to the database of the company. So if there's a tester, he doesn't get access to the database, he just gets the access to the program code or the source code which is there in the program. There could be a third person who is basically a manager who will be reviewing your programs. He doesn't get the access to the source code. He doesn't get the access to the database. He will be only seeing your program run, right? So he gets the view rights or the view role of your program. All right, so this is how role-based access works. All is defined using an administrator. Now, where do you use role-based? You basically use role-based whenever you are granting access to environment. So your program will work in an environment. Your program is itself an environment. There will be different people who will be interacting with your program. User could interact with your program, right? A developer could interact with your program. A manager could interact with the program. So all these people will have different views to the same program, and all of that is possible using role-based access. The next thing is called the Active Directory integration, which basically helps you to manage credentials. So for example, me, say I have an account in the company. So that's a different thing, that which role will be assigned to my account. But for logging into my account, there should be a particular protocol. There should be a way to log into my account. And these things are managed basically by the Active Directory. So it is a functionality that centralizes credential management. So there will be only one place where all my credentials will sit, and I can get my credentials from over there. So this is what Active Directory is all about. You can create and restrict user roles and entities to align with companies' policies using the same Active Directory. So that role-based tasks or the role-based access that we were talking about, these access are actually given through Active Directory program. Right, so you will have the credentials over here, you will also have the roles over here. So you can use the Active Directory to give access to your users who are there in the company. And this is what the Active Directory is actually used for. So Active Directory can also be implemented with your RPA tool. So Active Directory is not something which is a part of RPA, it is a separate entity. But why are we discussing it here is because it can be used with RPA tool. It can be easily integrated with any RPA tool and then can be used to provide roles to different users who are trying to use your program. Now we discussed about the RPA technology, right? So we know what RPA is, we know how we can create applications, we know the security aspect in RPA. But RPA is a technology which can be implemented using tools, right? So RPA itself is not a tool. You implement RPA using tools such as UiPath, such as Blue Prism, such as Automation Anywhere. So let us first see what are the different tools which are available in the market to implement the RPA technology. So these are the different tools, guys. You have Automation Anywhere, you have Blue Prism, you have UiPath, you have WorkFusion, and then you also have Pega. So along with these, there are a whole lot of different tools which are available in the market. Now you might be wondering which tool to use. How will you decide which tool to use? So there is a checklist which you can follow to actually choose a tool. You can see which technology that particular tool is built on so that you can relate it with your requirements that your user has given. For example, UiPath is constructed on the VB or the .NET technology. So you can assess the technology and you can see, okay, this is the tool that I can use. Then also you should take into account management, how you can manage your automations in your company. When I talk about management, this basically plays a role whenever you have, say, around 10 or 15 systems or 5 or 6 systems which have different kind of automations which are running on them. And you have to manage all these tools, or you have to manage all these computers which are running automation using a particular central server. So this is where management comes in. So you can see which tool is more easier to manage, or which tool creates my job easier or makes my job easier to manage the different automations which are running in the company. Then comes the part wherein you will also be looking at the interface, how easy the tool is to use. So if I were to learn, or if I were to train my employees to use the system or to use this tool, how easy would it be? Is what interface talks about, and then the security aspect. So whatever tool that you're trying to use, is it following the security compliance given by security organizations, right? So that basically tells you if you're creating applications in that RPA tool, how secure will that application be, right? That is the security aspect of your tool. And what tool will we learn? We will learn the UiPath tool, which is a free tool which has been provided by the UiPath company. And when I say free, the community edition is free for them. You can also buy the pro version for it by buying the license. But since we are learning, the community edition will suffice for us, and that is what we are going to use. So with this, I conclude today's session. Thank you for attending today's session. Have a good day ahead. Goodbye.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!